Bipolar disorder is a mental illness characterized by two distinct moods. Two distinct phases, as you would call them: depression and mania. So in depression, the person has very low energy, low levels, low mood levels, and someone can actually get suicidal. And in many cases of people with bipolar disorder, they tend to, try and commit suicide or try and die by suicide a couple of times. Then there's the other phase of bipolar disorder, which is mania, where someone has a heightened sense of self-worth. So basically you go over and beyond your energy levels, so you're actually bordering on schizoaffective disorder, where you believe you're a god, you're very hyperactive, you don't need to eat, you don't need to sleep, and yes, there's very little need for self-respect and self-worth and self-safety. So that's what bipolar disorder is.
I'm struck by the reality that at work, there are some of us that we literally, physically, we inherit or we have a disease like this that we have to handle. And this is part of who we are. And then for others of us, it's triggered by a situation. You know, I might have been fired unfairly from a job. I didn't do anything wrong, but now my family's lost our home, or I was unfairly convicted of something and now there's a police record and I can't get another job and I'm innocent. And I'm depressed about that. And how am I going to handle that? So I'm just struck by the fact that as a society, we're so lousy at reflecting on these issues or coping with them. And number two, that work tends to trigger so many of them.
In Kenya, we have so many, and I know you have been seeing this in social media, where people are having those suicidal tendencies or they are committing suicide. These are because of the stressors. Remember I told you about the triggers, like what he has just said, the triggers. There's something which is making them to go to that state. And that is what I said is good. And I told you someone who is going to be in a condition, remember she said she didn't know. And she had been working there for so many years. So it is you who is supposed to be observing your colleagues when you are working as a team. You get to know some of the signs which they never had there before. Then they can be alerted. They take care of that. And the issue when now you're having these stressors and they are not handled or addressed, this is now what makes most people to commit suicide. Because they have those thoughts. Because already they are having a disorder within them. So they need to be assisted before it goes to that level.
Manage your triggers, because when you manage your triggers, then you're able to avoid the depressive episodes or the manic episodes. Then I would have told my boss to be more involving, not to just assume my not coming to work or my calling in sick is just because I'm lazy, not to assume that I wasn't happy at my job. And I would have probably told my supervisor to have been more lenient, to have been less psychologically abusive or physically abusive. Not physically, like verbally abusive. Because sometimes you have toxic relationships in the workplace that can trigger this mental health issues. Every time I came up with maybe a program to work or I'm working on an assignment, then the first thing they'd tell me is, are you okay? It's good to have concern, but you can't always assume that just because someone is being, outspoken, it means, oh no, she's having a manic episode. She doesn't agree with my opinion. She must be having a manic episode. So it was always very difficult to try and assert yourself in the workplace when everyone assumes that everything you do is because of your illness. So looking back, those are the things I would have, addressed.
What does it look like to really recognize that this is a person created in the image of God? Right? So even if there's a mental health issue, just like I may have a physical health issue, that I and you are still created in the image of God. So I think spiritually that the first place I go is, and it's not just at work, it's in all of our life. It's being able to see past what most of the world tends to see, which is just the obvious veneer or cover of the person. And to be able to see the depth of that person underneath it. That's the first thought. The second thought I had was, what does it look like if we want to be the church at work? We talk, when we go to our local churches, we talk about ministry, right? We want to minister to people. Well, talk about a ministry opportunity What does it look like to be a blessing, to serve someone in a situation like this, to come alongside them? So that was the second thought that went through my mind is, how can we recognize, and not just with mental health issues, but just with all of the people with whom we work? This is our sphere of influence at work. Think of it like a congregation. If we're ministering to that congregation, how do we come alongside those people? How do we serve and support them? That's the second thought that went through my mind. And then the third thought is just, what does it look like for us to be creative at work when it comes to the design of work? Because as I was listening to your story, I was thinking to myself, there might be a way to consider how to organize a job that could come around someone in a situation like this. Maybe it's flexible hours. Maybe it's, obviously it's colleagues who are not trying to trigger you. But my point is, where you say, how can we create a work environment that's conducive to support for this person?
What I can say, especially I usually like talking to HR officers, wherever you are, please organize for talks. Educate people. Let them have knowledge. Then address the issue of stigma and discrimination. Like you said, this is an image, a person we need to respect. And as you see her, is she looking like a person who has a disorder? It's like you and me, as I said, but it's only that now for it came out. Most of us, we are in that condition, but we are not aware we are in it. And when you are in this condition, it's like when a person is having diabetes, or you're having maybe heart issues, all of us, we are sick. But now where are we discriminating this other employee who has come up with this condition?
It's more of we need to take more time, spend more time, make our managers aware, make our leaders aware that this is an issue. Someone can't just wake up one morning and decide not to come to work. It is not a natural way of people doing things. So, and then the hard thing usually comes when you have to explain to managers, how do I separate laziness from mental health? Then that becomes a very big issue. Because then how do you draw the line? This person is just outrightly lazy, and this person has actually a real issue that we need to work on. Secondly is, which I think I'll tie it with awareness, it's just that building the structures within the firm to allow for people actually to get time off. Like what Omboy has just shared is someone has worked 9 months, no break, no nothing. So the lack of taking breaks will actually trigger what is actually happening. So it's just creating an environment that is conducive to allow everyone to be able to take rest, because our bodies need rest. And if you assert your body a lot, it has a way of fighting back because it actually needs to rest.
Look for what's not being said. So there must be triggers that she maybe was not verbalizing, but somebody around her should have noticed something is not right. Even if you're saying one thing, what is actually not being said? What's behind all this? So I think looking for more of what is happening. I think at the Unstuck conference as well this year, Sunny Bindra said, I think it's important for us to look at people as human beings rather than human resources. So there's even that language. Immediately we start seeing them as people who are human beings, who have issues, who have struggles, who are then coming to work, who then there's pressure. That will also help us. And I think also reaching out for help. I don't know whether you did reach out for help, or maybe that's something else, that just that people would find avenues to reach out for help.
Whenever I need to go see my psychiatrist or my psychologist, I get a day off. And it doesn't have to be sick leave, or it doesn't have to be long leave. It can be like a mental day. So people are encouraged to take mental days where you just take a break, have fun. They even have a gym now. We have a gym, we have a swimming pool, we have a tennis court. So guys are encouraged to take breaks at work. And guys are not encouraged to stay in the office past 6 p.m. If you need to stay in the office past 6 p.m., then you have to have a good reason. So I think my incident and my outburst at work also helped many other line managers know how to deal with their staff who might have issues.
What does it look like for those who are in management to simply be more observant of the behavior? They may not know exactly what it means or how to place a judgment on it, but to be able to say, okay, this person has been grouchy for more than 2 weeks straight, and that's different than it's normally been, and I'm not sure what that is. I'm not going to judge it, but I see it. What do I do about that? So it strikes me that this is an area of management development that candidly I just don't hear talked about. It's more just like, are people producing, and how do you motivate them if they're not productive enough, or get rid of them if they can't produce? And so it's a whole different way of thinking about what management looks like. Maybe it's a way to talk about ministering to people at work from a manager's point of view, to really be more observant. The other thought connected to that was, if organizations had more capacity in what I'll call the human resources area, where if a manager is observing things and can bring those observations, that person in human resources would be in a position to do something with that information. At the very least, to be able to tap into some expertise to better understand the total situation, to make an appropriate choice on what do we do with this. I'm also imagining if I'm an employer who's trying to be there for an employee, but it also means lost productivity, and employees are distracted, and work isn't getting done, and how do I handle that cost to the organization? So there is a real dilemma here between servanthood to the individual and stewardship to the organization. How do you integrate those? How do you reconcile those? I don't have an immediate answer, but that's what's going through my mind.
When you look at recruiting an employee, it's a very expensive exercise. You'll spend a lot of money advertising. You remember all the process until you get a person you're going to employ there. And we see when they're going to be mentally ill and they're going to walk out of that organization, it means they have to be replaced. Again, you'll go through the same process, which you could have maybe done by taking care of them about their emotional issues, about their psychological issues, which you could have addressed. What is that organization doing to these best brains? Are you going to damage, or are you going to support them so that they be able to grow? Start in advance, talk to people, let them know that when you are going for counseling, you are not mentally ill, but you want to be aware about some issues so that it doesn't advance. That is what I'm emphasizing. If someone wants to pray, encourage them to do it. If someone wants to sing, encourage them to do what gives them happiness. By the way, that's how to manage stress. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, please appreciate them and give them a round of applause.